My name is Rebecca Hayes. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a fraud investigator for a credit union outside Charlotte, which means I spend most of my day tracing patterns people think nobody will notice. So maybe that's why I stayed so calm when my own family tried to turn Christmas dinner into a public punishment. There were 32 relatives in the house that night, ham on the table, sweet potato casserole in glass dishes, Christmas lights blinking on the tree, everyone laughing like this was the kind of family you see in greeting cards. Then my mother handed me a plate and told me there was no room for me at the table. Not in a joking way, not in an embarrassed way. She pointed toward the screened in sunroom and told me to eat out there. It was 34 degrees. My winter coat was already gone because my stepfather had taken it from me at the door and tossed it into the basement laundry sink, saying, "Strays didn't need coats because they should be grateful for scraps." I looked at my mother, waiting for her to correct him, waiting for even 1 second of shame to cross her face. Nothing. She just lowered her voice and told me not to make a scene in front of everyone, so I took the plate. I walked out into the sunroom, and the second I stepped through the doorway, I heard the latch slide behind me. Through the glass panels, my younger sister lifted her phone and started recording. She was laughing so hard, she pressed one hand against the window. I could still hear her through the thin walls. She's actually sitting out there. Then someone inside said, "Mutts eat in the cold." And the room laughed like I wasn't standing there with a paper napkin shaking in my hand. What they didn't know was that 1 week later, I would walk back into that same family's life with the one thing they had been counting on for 14 years. And when my mother saw me, her face went completely pale. Before I tell you what happened after that latch slid behind me, tell me this. If your own family made you eat outside on Christmas, would you forgive them or would you wait quietly until the truth finally had a chance to speak? That Christmas didn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't one bad night, one cruel joke that went too far, or one misunderstanding that everyone could explain away afterward. It was the kind of moment that only happens after people spend years teaching themselves that your feelings don't count. My mother had me when she was 18. My biological father disappeared so early in my life that I don't have a single real memory of him. Only a few blurry stories my mother told whenever she wanted me to feel grateful for being raised at all. When I was 5, she married the man I was told to call Daddy. She said it would make us feel like a real family. But the truth was calling him Daddy never made him treat me like his daughter. It only gave him another word to use against me when he wanted to remind me I was lucky he allowed me to live under his roof. 2 years later, my little sister was born. And that was when the line in the house became impossible to ignore. She was his real daughter. I was the old problem my mother had brought with her. She got the bedroom with the white furniture and the canopy bed. I slept for years in a converted storage room where the water heater hummed through the wall every night. She got piano lessons, new boots, school photos in matching frames. I got whatever was left after everyone else had already been taken care of. If I asked for anything, even something small, he would look at my mother and say, "This is what happens when you drag mistakes into a second chance." My mother never liked that word mistakes, but she also never told him to stop using it. That was her pattern. She didn't always join in, but she created the silence that made it safe for him to keep going. When I was 11, I learned not to ask why my sister got birthday parties, and I got a grocery store cupcake after dinner. When I was 14, I learned to stop waiting for anyone to notice when I was left out of family pictures, because he said it looked cleaner with just the four of them. When I was 17, I learned that if I wanted school supplies, a phone bill, or money for gas, I needed to work after school and pay for it myself. Every time I looked upset, my mother said the same things. "Don't start drama. He works hard. You know he has trouble showing affection. You're old enough to understand." I understood more than she wanted me to. I understood that peace in our house meant everyone stepping over me so the man she married wouldn't get irritated. I understood that being the easy child really meant being the child who swallowed everything. The only person who never bought their version of the story was my grandmother. I called her Nana. She never had to say much. Sometimes she would just watch the way my mother handed my sister a full plate and then told me to help in the kitchen before I ate. Sometimes she would look at me across a room after my stepfather made a joke that wasn't really a joke, and her face would tighten like she had just seen something ugly she couldn't unsee. As I got older, I became closer to her in a way I never was with the rest of them. I drove her to medical appointments when my mother said she was too busy. I helped her update her phone. I fixed the little things around her retirement condo. I called her on Saturday afternoons because she liked to talk while folding laundry. I never did those things because I wanted anything from her. I did them because she was the only adult in my family who ever looked at me like I wasn't some accident everyone was still paying for. So when she called me 3 weeks before Christmas and said she wanted one more big family holiday while she still felt strong enough to enjoy it, I said yes. I knew where the dinner would be. I knew who would be there. I knew there was a good chance I would regret walking into that house. But she sounded tired on the phone, softer than usual. And when she said, I just want all my people in one place, I couldn't tell her no. I didn't go for my mother. I didn't go for the man I had been forced to call daddy. I definitely didn't go for my sister. I went for Nana. And maybe a small part of me went because I wanted to see if after all these years they would finally have enough shame not to humiliate me in front of the whole family. I should have known better. The house looked warm from the outside. That's the detail I keep remembering because it almost feels like a trick now. Golden light in the windows, cars packed along the driveway, the sound of relatives laughing, before I even reached the porch steps. If a stranger had driven by, they would have thought it was a perfect American Christmas. Inside, there was a basketball game on the TV, folding chairs along the walls, kids running through the hallway, and the smell of ham, greens, cornbread, pecan pie, and coffee all mixed together. I walked in wearing a decent black winter coat. Nothing expensive, just warm enough for late December in North Carolina. The man I called Daddy looked me up and down like I had arrived wearing a crown. He held out his hand and told me to give him the coat. I thought he was going to hang it in the hall closet like a normal person, so I handed it over. 5 minutes later, he came back from the basement, wiping his hands together, and said loud enough for the living room to hear that he had tossed it into the laundry sink. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. He smiled and said, Strays don't need coats because they should be grateful for scraps. A couple of people laughed because they thought that was what they were supposed to do. My mother was standing near the kitchen doorway with a dish towel in her hand. She heard it. She absolutely heard it. She looked at me for half a second, then turned back toward the stove. That was the first lock clicking, even before the real one. Dinner took another hour. I helped set out serving spoons. I carried rolls to the table. I refilled sweet tea. My sister floated around with her phone, taking videos of the food and asking people to say hi to her followers. She had always been good at making cruelty look cute. When it was time to sit down, I noticed the table had been arranged with a strange kind of precision. Every chair had a person. Every cousin, aunt, uncle, in-law, and child had a place. There was one plate left on the counter. My mother picked it up and handed it to me. It was already filled. Ham on one side, greens pressed flat, a small spoonful of cranberry sauce sliding into the gravy. I asked where I was supposed to sit. She didn't even pretend to look around. She said there wasn't enough room this year, so I could eat in the sunroom for a little while. At first, I honestly thought I had heard her wrong. I said, Outside? She lowered her voice and told me not to embarrass her in front of everyone. She said it was only for a few minutes. She said the sunroom was covered. She said I was being dramatic before I had even reacted. I looked over her shoulder and saw my sister watching, already smiling. That was when I understood that this hadn't happened by accident. There was no missing chair. There was no mistake. They had planned a full Christmas table and left exactly one person outside it. I took the plate because I wanted to see how far they were really willing to go. I walked through the kitchen door into the sunroom. Cold hit me immediately. It wasn't snowing, but the air had that sharp, damp bite that gets into your fingers first. There was a plastic chair near the railing and a tiny space heater plugged in by the wall, the kind that barely warms your ankles if you sit 2 inches away from it. I turned around, to ask if someone could at least get my coat from the laundry sink. Before I could say anything, my mother pulled the door shut. Then I heard the latch slide. It was a small sound, but it cut through everything. Behind the glass, my sister lifted her phone. She was laughing so hard her shoulders shook. I could read her lips before I heard her through the door. She's actually sitting out there. Then she pointed the camera at me like I was part of the entertainment. Someone inside said, "Mutts, eat in the cold." Someone else laughed. I sat down with the plate on my knees because suddenly standing there felt worse. Through the glass, I could see people eating, passing bowls, leaning back in chairs, looking uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to stand up. A few relatives glanced toward me. One cousin looked like he might say something, but my mother touched his arm and said something I couldn't hear. Later, I found out what she had told them. She said I was getting over something contagious and didn't want anyone too close to me. She made my exile sound like a considerate choice. She turned locking her daughter outside into a health precaution. Nana wasn't at the table. She was in the front sitting room because the noise in the dining area tired her out. My mother had told her I was taking a work call in another room and would come sit with her after dinner. That lie was the only reason Nana didn't come looking for me. I ate slowly, not because I was hungry, but because I refused to give them the scene they wanted. My hands were cold. My food went cold faster. At one point, my sister came back to the door, tapped the glass with one fingernail, and mouthed, "Smile!" I did. I smiled right at her camera. Not because I was amused, not because I forgave them. I smiled because I knew something they didn't. After about 45 minutes, my mother finally opened the door and said I could come in for dessert, like she had done me a favor. I walked past her without answering. I found Nana in the sitting room under a crocheted blanket. She took my hand and frowned because my fingers were freezing. She asked why I was so cold. I told her my car heater was acting up. I hated lying to her, but I hated the thought of breaking her heart in that room even more. My sister posted the video that night, not publicly at first, just to her TikTok close friends and a family group chat with a caption about Christmas entertainment. One person screen recorded it and sent it to me with a message that said, "Please tell me this was staged." I didn't reply. I saved the video. I saved the caption. I saved the messages. They had spent years calling me too sensitive, dramatic, ungrateful, impossible. For the first time, they had given me proof with their own voices, their own laughter, and their own locked door. Here's what none of them knew while I was sitting in that sunroom, with cold gravy on my plate. 3 years before that Christmas, Nana had asked me to drive her to an appointment she didn't want my mother to know about. I thought it was medical. It wasn't. It was with an estate attorney. She had already made up her mind by the time I got there. She told me in the parking lot afterward, sitting in the passenger seat with both hands around her purse, that she had changed her will. I remember saying she didn't need to tell me anything private. She said, "No, honey, you need to know because when the time comes, they're going to make you feel like a thief." Then she told me she was leaving me the house, not just any house, the house my mother and stepfather had been living in rent-free for 14 years. The house everyone in the family thought of as theirs because they had repeated that lie so often, it started sounding like truth. Nana owned it completely. After she moved into the retirement condo, she let them stay there because my mother said it would keep the house maintained and close to family. At first, Nana believed that. Then, over the years, she began to realize they weren't preserving her home. They were waiting for her to die inside their plans. The house was worth around $385,000, maybe more, depending on the market. Nana also had a small savings account set aside for repairs. Nothing huge, but enough to repaint, replace old fixtures, and make the place livable after they left. I told her I couldn't accept it. She looked almost angry when I said that. Not angry at me, angry at the world that had trained me to refuse being protected. She said she had watched enough. She had watched my sister sit on the couch while I cleared holiday dishes. She had watched my mother take credit for gifts Nana sent me, and somehow the gifts never reached me. She had heard my stepfather tell people I wasn't really his responsibility while eating food in a house he didn't own. She said leaving me the house wasn't charity, it was correction. It was the only way she could still stand up for me, with something stronger than words. I promised her I wouldn't say anything unless she wanted me to. For 3 years, I carried that secret while my stepfather talked about the house like it already belonged to him. He bragged at barbecues about expanding the garage someday. He talked about refinancing his truck because they had real estate coming. My mother ordered furniture she couldn't really afford because, as she once said when she thought I wasn't listening, once the house is ours, things will loosen up. They made choices based on a future they had invented. They didn't save. They didn't plan. They didn't treat Nana with any real tenderness. They treated her like a locked box with a key they were sure would eventually fall into their hands. 1 week after Christmas, Nana had a small fall at the retirement condo. She didn't break anything, but it scared her. Her doctor told her gently that it might be time to make sure her affairs were clearly communicated. Nana took that seriously. She called a family meeting. I knew about it because she called me the night before and said, "I'm going to tell them." I asked if she wanted me there. She said no. She said if I came, they would turn it into a fight with me instead of listening to her. So I stayed home. I made tea. I put my phone face down and I waited. The first call came less than an hour after the meeting started. Then another. Then 7 more. Then texts from relatives who hadn't checked on me in years. My mother called over and over, leaving voicemails that started soft and became sharp. My stepfather sent one message that said, "You have no idea what you just did." My sister sent, "What did you say to Nana, you psycho?" I didn't answer. Not one of them had called after Christmas to ask if I was okay. Not one had apologized for the sunroom, the coat, the contagious lie, the video. But the second they found out the house wasn't theirs, suddenly my phone became the most important object in their lives. I sat there watching their names appear on the screen, one after another. And for the first time, I understood what leverage felt like. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was quiet. It was me choosing not to pick up, while they finally had to wonder what I would do next. I waited 4 days before I agreed to meet my mother. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted her to understand something she had never had to understand before. She wasn't in control of the timing anymore. She texted that we needed to talk as a family. I replied that I would meet her alone at a coffee shop near my office. No husband, no daughter, no surprise audience. If anyone else showed up, I would leave. She called that cruel. I called it a boundary. She arrived 12 minutes late, wearing the same wounded expression she used anytime someone expected accountability from her. Before she even sat down, I could tell she hadn't come to apologize. She had come to negotiate the cost of my silence. The first thing she said was that Nana wasn't thinking clearly. Not, "I'm sorry I locked you outside." Not, "I should have stopped them." Not, "What happened on Christmas was wrong." She said my grandmother was old, emotional, and easily influenced. She said I had always known how to make people feel sorry for me. I let her talk. That was something my job had taught me too. People reveal more when they think they're winning. She said my stepfather had maintained that house for 14 years. She said they had painted rooms, fixed plumbing, replaced appliances, shoveled snow, paid utilities, made it a home. She said I had moved out and built my own life, so it was selfish to take away the only stability they had left. I asked her if she hurt herself. She blinked like the question confused her. I said, "You're sitting here telling me I should care about the stability of the people who locked me outside in December and told everyone I was contagious." Her mouth tightened. She said Christmas was being blown out of proportion. There hadn't been enough room. The sunroom was supposed to be temporary. Things got busy. Everyone was stressed. She said, "You know how holidays are." I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. I played the video my sister had recorded. The coffee shop was noisy, but not noisy enough to cover the sound of laughter through the glass door. My mother watched herself move in the background, watched my sister point at me, watched my face through the window as someone inside said, Mutts eat in the cold. I paused the video and asked her what part of that was temporary. She looked away. Then she said, "Your sister shouldn't have posted it." That was the closest she came to admitting anything wrong had happened. Not that they had done it, that someone had documented it. I told her that was the difference between us. She was embarrassed it was seen. I was disgusted it happened. Her face changed. Then the soft voice disappeared. She leaned forward and said, "I didn't understand what I was doing to the family." She said Nana loved all of us and would never want the house to tear everyone apart. She said there had to be a fair solution. I asked what fair meant. She said maybe I could sell the house and divide the money, or let them continue living there until they found somewhere else, or sign something where they would receive a larger portion because they had invested so much into the property. There it was, the real reason for the meeting. Not love, not regret, not family healing. A house, money, control. I told her no. One word. She stared at me like I had slapped her. I said Nana made her decision with a lawyer, and when the time came, I would follow it exactly. My mother said I was acting cold. I told her cold was eating Christmas dinner outside with no coat, while your mother sat inside pretending not to notice. She whispered that I was going to regret turning my back on them. I asked if that was a threat. She said it was a warning. Then she said maybe she needed to have a private conversation with Nana, mother to mother, about how I had always been dramatic, how I twisted things, how I might not be the right person to handle anything important. I almost laughed. For 26 years, I had waited for my mother to defend me. Now, she was openly telling me she might lie to a sick old woman to take away the only protection that woman had ever given me. I stood up. I told her that if she tried to manipulate Nana, I would make sure every person in the family saw the Christmas video. Not the edited version, not the little clip my sister thought was funny. All of it. The coat, the sunroom, the latch, the contagious lie. My mother said people would think I was pathetic for showing it. I said, maybe, but they would know exactly who taught me to survive humiliation in silence. I left her sitting there with 2 untouched coffees between us. That night, my stepfather came to my apartment building and waited in the parking lot for almost an hour. I watched from my window. He never came inside. He just sat in his truck. Like intimidation was still a language I was supposed to understand. I recorded the truck, the plate, the time. Then I called building security. By morning, I had sent everything to Nana's lawyer. The lawyer's name was Mr. Kenneth Ross, and he had the calm voice of a man who had seen families become monsters over property many times before. He didn't sound surprised when I told him my mother was questioning Nana's mental state. He said that if Nana wanted to protect her decision, the best thing she could do was document her wishes clearly while she was lucid, specific, and represented. Nana agreed immediately. 2 days later, I sat beside her in a small conference room at the retirement condo while Mr. Ross set up a camera. Nana wore a lavender cardigan and had her hair pinned back the way she liked it for Sunday service. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear. The video lasted almost 40 minutes. She stated her full name, the date, where she was, and that no one had pressured her. Then she explained why she had changed her will. She didn't speak in vague feelings. She gave details. She talked about visiting our house when I was little and finding me washing dishes while my sister opened presents in the living room. She talked about sending birthday money that somehow never reached me. She talked about hearing my stepfather call me an extra mouth to feed. She talked about my mother excusing everything because she wanted to keep her marriage peaceful. Then her voice broke when she talked about Christmas. She said she hadn't known I was in the sunroom until after the video reached her through a cousin who thought she had already seen it. She said watching me sit outside that glass door was the moment she stopped wondering if she was being too harsh. Her exact words were, "A family that can eat warm food while a daughter is locked outside in the cold has already made its moral choice." I cried when she said that, but quietly, because the video wasn't about me crying. It was about her telling the truth while she still could. Afterward, Mr. Ross said the statement would be very difficult to challenge. Nana also signed paperwork naming me as her healthcare proxy and limiting what medical information my mother and stepfather could access without her permission. That part mattered more than I expected. Within 48 hours, my mother had already called the facility asking about medication schedules, cognitive evaluations, and what would be required to request guardianship. The administrator didn't give her anything, but she did call me. When my mother found out Nana had blocked her from private medical decisions, she showed up at my workplace. I saw her near my car after my shift, standing there in the cold, like she had rehearsed a speech all the way over. She said I had turned her mother against her. I said no, she had done that herself. She said I was isolating an elderly woman for money. I said protecting someone from people trying to use her health records wasn't isolation. She started crying then, but her tears didn't soften me the way they used to. I had seen too many tears that only appeared when consequences arrived. A few days later, my stepfather organized a family meeting at the house. The message said they needed to discuss Nana's care and the future of the family. I wasn't invited. That would have bothered me once. This time, it made things easier. I called Aunt Linda, my mother's older sister, one of the few relatives who had ever treated me like a real person. I told her I knew about the meeting. I told her I had something people needed to see before they decided I was the villain. She asked if I meant the sunroom video. I said yes, but not just that. I sent her the full clip, the screenshots of my sister mocking me, the messages from my stepfather about the house being practically his, and a voicemail from my mother saying Nana was confused and needed to be handled. I didn't ask Aunt Linda to defend me. I asked her to let the evidence speak. That Sunday, I stayed home and cleaned my kitchen because I needed something to do with my hands. At 5:14, my phone buzzed. Then again, then again. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years started texting. One said, "I had no idea." Another said, "I'm sorry I laughed." Then Aunt Linda called. She said my stepfather had been standing in the living room telling everyone I had manipulated a sick woman for a house. She let him talk. Then she connected her phone to the TV and played the video. The room went silent when they saw me outside. It got worse when they heard my sister laughing. It got worse again when Aunt Linda told them my mother had said I was contagious, so nobody would check on me. My stepfather tried to call it a joke. Nobody laughed. My mother said people were misunderstanding the context. Aunt Linda asked what context made it acceptable to lock your daughter outside on Christmas. According to my cousin, that was when half the room started leaving. Not dramatically, not screaming, just coats on, keys out, faces disgusted. My sister texted me before the meeting was even over. She said I had ruined everything. I looked at the message for a long time because it was almost funny. She had recorded the cruelty. She had captioned it. She had shared it. But somehow I had ruined everything by letting people understand what they were watching. That night, my phone filled with angry calls from the three of them and quiet apologies from everyone else. I didn't answer the angry ones. I listened to the apologies once, then saved them too. Not because I needed sympathy, because for the first time, the story my family had built around me was cracking in public. They had spent my whole life calling me the problem. One video showed everyone who had been creating the problem all along. Nana declined faster after that. I don't know if it was the fall, the stress, or simply her body deciding it had carried enough years, but the change was visible. Some days she was sharp and wanted updates about everything. Other days, she drifted in and out, asking the same question twice, or calling me by my mother's name for a few seconds before correcting herself. I visited as often as I could. I brought coffee even when she only took 2 sips. I read her mail. I rubbed lotion into her hands. Sometimes we talked about the house. Sometimes we didn't. One afternoon, she told me she wasn't giving me the house so I could spend the rest of my life angry inside it. She said, "Promise me you'll make it peaceful." I promised. Meanwhile, my stepfather tried one last legal move. His lawyer sent a letter claiming he was owed more than $68,000 for repairs and improvements made over 14 years. Mr. Ross responded with documents showing he had lived in the property rent-free the entire time, never had written permission for major renovations, and had never been promised ownership. He also included Nana's video statement where she clearly said the house was hers, the choice was hers, and no one had the right to treat her property like a reward for waiting her out. After that, the legal threats became quieter. Not gone, but quieter. People like him don't stop believing they deserve things. They just stop saying it when the proof makes them look ridiculous. My mother came to the facility twice after Nana changed the paperwork. The first time, staff wouldn't let her visit alone. She sat in the common area with her purse on her lap, watching me through the doorway while I helped Nana drink water. She looked smaller than I remembered, but I didn't confuse that with innocence. The second time, she caught me in the hall and said she was losing her mother and her daughter at the same time. I told her she had lost me years ago. She said she had made mistakes, but she had been trying to keep the family together. I asked her if locking me outside was keeping the family together. She closed her eyes like the question hurt her. Then she said, "Christmas got out of hand." That was her apology. Not I was wrong. Not you deserved better. Just another soft blanket thrown over something ugly. I told her shame wasn't the same as accountability. She asked what she could do to fix it. I said nothing. That was the truth. There are moments in a relationship when repair is possible. And there are moments when the only honest thing left is distance. Nana passed on a Friday morning. I was there. She woke up near the end, looked right at me, and said my name clearly. Then she said, "Be happy in that house." Those were the last words she said to me. The funeral was 6 days later. My mother and stepfather sat near the front like grief could erase greed if enough people saw it. My sister wore black and posted a filtered photo of a candle before the service even started. I sat with Aunt Linda and Uncle James. Nobody from Nana's side said much to my mother. Silence can be cruel, but that day it felt like judgment. At the reception, my stepfather finally cornered me near the food table. He smelled like whiskey and anger. He said I might have fooled a dying old woman and half the family, but he knew what I really was. He said I was a leech who had waited for Nana to die so I could steal a house from the people who earned it. For once, I didn't step back. I let him talk. I let him say the house had been his in every way that mattered. I let him say I would remember him every time I walked through the front door. Then I looked past his shoulder and smiled. Uncle James, Aunt Linda, and 2 cousins were standing close enough to hear every word. My stepfather turned around and saw them. His face changed. That was the sound of another lock clicking, except this time he was the one trapped behind it. Probate wasn't instant, but it was cleaner than they hoped. The video helped. The paperwork helped. Their own behavior helped most of all. The will was approved. The house transferred to me. And Mr. Ross sent formal notice, giving my mother and stepfather 6 months to move out. My mother sent one long message asking for more time, more compassion, more understanding. She said rent was expensive, the market was terrible, and they had nowhere appropriate to go. I read it once. Then I remembered being handed a plate and sent outside in 34 degrees. I told her the date wouldn't change. They moved out 5 days before the deadline. I didn't go inside until the final morning when I arrived with a locksmith. The house smelled like dust and old anger. They had taken a few small fixtures, left trash bags in the garage, and scratched the floor, dragging furniture out. It was petty, but not surprising. I used Nana's savings to repair what needed repairing. I painted the storage room first, not because anyone would see it, but because some part of me needed that room to stop looking like a place where a child had learned to be quiet. Then I moved into the master bedroom. The first night, I sat at the dining table with takeout noodles because I was too tired to cook. And I laughed when I realized I was sitting in the chair I had never been allowed to use as a kid. A month later, I hosted a small dinner. Aunt Linda came. Uncle James came. A few cousins came, including one who apologized again for not speaking up sooner. We ate at the table. Everyone had a chair. Nobody had to earn their place. My sister lost the perfect image she loved so much. She deleted the video, then locked down her TikTok after relatives started unfollowing her and asking why she thought cruelty was content. My mother and stepfather rented a small 2 bedroom apartment 35 minutes away. I heard that from someone else, not from them. My mother still sends messages sometimes. Some are almost apologies. Most are reminders that she sees herself as the person who suffered most. I don't answer. Not because I hate her every day. Hate takes energy, and I'm trying to spend mine differently now. I sit on the back sunroom, most mornings with coffee. The same sunroom where they locked me out. The first few times I thought it would hurt more than it did, but places aren't cursed by what happened there. Sometimes they can be reclaimed by what you choose to do next. Nana left me a house, but that wasn't the real inheritance. The real inheritance was the proof that someone had seen me clearly. The lesson I carry now is simple. Family doesn't mean you get unlimited chances to harm someone and still demand loyalty. Silence isn't peace when it protects cruelty. And revenge doesn't always have to be loud, messy, or cruel. Sometimes the strongest revenge is telling the truth, keeping the evidence, accepting the help you deserve, and building a life where the people who locked you outside no longer decide where you belong. I didn't win because they lost the house. I won because I stopped begging for a seat at a table that was never meant for me. Now I have my own table, my own key, my own morning light, and a home where nobody gets left outside in the cold.